Have you noticed how the moments before you act feel heavier than the action itself? That strange paralysis, when your mind is awake but your body refuses to move. You stare at the task, the message, the blank page, and it feels like gravity itself has changed direction. Time expands, thoughts multiply, and your energy seems to dissolve in the space between intention and movement. This is not laziness. It is not lack of discipline. It is the symptom of a deeper imbalance, a rupture in the natural rhythm between the inner pulse and the outer act. In Hermeticism, this moment of stillness is not meaningless. It is the shadow side of the law of rhythm. Everything flows, rises and falls. When you resist this motion, you become trapped in the pause itself, suspended between the poles of will and inertia. The ancient texts call it the pendulum of consciousness. Every state, joy or despair, clarity or confusion, swings between two poles. To fight the swing is to freeze the pendulum, and when the pendulum freezes, life ceases to circulate through you. What you call procrastination is, in truth, the psychic echo of a rhythm broken. Energy that once moved toward creation becomes trapped in overthinking. The current no longer flows outward, it turns inward, looping endlessly in mental self-interference. That's why the more you think about starting, the heavier it becomes. The weight isn't in the task, it's in the energy spiraling inside your head, unexpressed. The Hermetic Principle of Vibration teaches nothing rests. What you perceive as stagnation is only motion locked in a closed circuit, energy eating itself because it has nowhere to go. Every time you postpone action, you're not avoiding the task. You're avoiding the transformation that movement would trigger, because motion changes identity. Each small act is an alchemical fire. It burns an old version of you. The fear that paralyzes you is the fear of dying in miniature, the death of inertia, the end of comfort, the disintegration of what you've been. This is why procrastination feels spiritual, not logical. You sense that movement is not merely productivity, it is transmutation. And transmutation always demands a sacrifice, the surrender of who you were before doing. The Hermetic initiate understands that nothing truly begins when you start. The work begins when resistance appears. Resistance is sacred. It marks the threshold between imagination and incarnation. In alchemy, that threshold is called nigredo, the black phase, where matter dissolves, where all form collapses before rebirth. The modern mind calls it burnout, anxiety, or creative block. But it is the same ancient stage, the confusion before clarity, the silence before sound. Procrastination then is not failure, it is an initiation. The question is not how to eliminate it, but how to read its code. What message does your stillness carry? What is the rhythm you have ignored for so long that your own energy now refuses to obey? If you observe carefully, every act of delay hides a cycle. There is a time when you expand, imagination, enthusiasm, planning, and then comes contraction, doubt, resistance, fatigue. Both are part of one motion. The law of rhythm says, all things rise and fall, inhale and exhale, live and die. When you attach yourself only to the high tide of inspiration, you become slave to its absence. You fight the fall instead of learning its timing. You lose the ability to surf the descent. The Hermetic masters never fought the pendulum. They rode it. They observed the descent without resistance, using the contraction to gather potential for the next descent. The energy you call procrastination is nothing but the compressed potential of a cycle not yet understood. The moment you stop judging the pause and start listening to it, something extraordinary happens. The stillness begins to vibrate again. It becomes movement in latency. The wheel turns when the observer stops pushing and starts witnessing. This is the secret paradox. Movement returns when you stop trying to move and instead restore your rhythm internally. You do not need to force yourself into action. You need to restore the pulse, to reconnect with the hermetic flow of energy that moves through all things. You do this by breathing with awareness, by aligning breath and thought, by grounding your presence in a single gesture, however small. In that moment, you are no longer procrastinating, you are recalibrating vibration, and once vibration is restored, movement becomes inevitable. What if your procrastination is not disobedience but communication? What if it's your soul whispering, "You are out of rhythm, come back to the beat," because nothing is truly still. The law of vibration declares, nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. Even your paralysis is a form of motion, just trapped between frequencies. The work is not to fight stillness, but to transmute it into rhythm. The act of returning to flow is not about effort, it is about remembrance. Your first task is not to act, but to observe where your energy goes when you avoid acting. Observation is ignition. Awareness breaks the spell, because the true enemy is not delay, it is unconscious motion. You are not trapped by time, but by the way you distribute your inner energy. The Hermetic path is not about doing more, it is about doing in rhythm. The more aligned your action, the less resistance it meets. The Hermetic alchemist does not force the wheel to spin. He simply removes what blocks it, and the wheel moves by itself. The wheel is your life. The wheel is your mind. And right now, it waits for the first pulse of remembrance to turn again. When you stop calling your stillness failure, you begin to hear its frequency. That frequency is not weakness. It's the echo of the rhythm you forgot to honor. In the silence before action, something sacred is calling. And if you listen deeply enough, you will hear the truth. You were never procrastinating. You were being recalibrated. Maybe no one ever noticed the weight you've been carrying, the invisible pause between who you are and what you could become. Maybe you've walked for years, circling the same point, wondering why movement feels so far away. You didn't find this by accident. Messages like this aren't pushed. They're pulled by resonance. And if something in you moved while listening, if this felt less like information and more like remembrance, it means the wheel has already started to turn. You've always carried the code. The law of rhythm was never lost, only forgotten. And from this moment on, there is no stillness that is not sacred. If something inside you vibrated with this truth, click like right now. That gesture is your first movement, your silent way of saying, "I'm here, and I remember the rhythm." You wake up with clarity. You know exactly what needs to be done. The plan is simple, but something unseen pulls you back into the fog. It's as if there's a hidden gravity beneath your thoughts, a force that reverses the flow the moment you decide to move. That force is not external. It's the pendulum of your own energy. In Hermeticism, the law of polarity states, everything has two poles, activity and passivity, will and hesitation, creation and decay. You are not separate from this law. You are its instrument, and when your inner rhythm is unbalanced, your energy swings violently between the poles, intention and withdrawal, inspiration and exhaustion. Procrastination is not the absence of will. It's will oscillating too fast to stabilize. You build pressure in one direction until your mind, unable to contain it, swings back to its opposite. That reversal is invisible but absolute. One moment you feel infinite potential, and the next, you can't even stand up. The ancients called this oscillation the pendulum of becoming. It rules everything, from cosmic tides to human moods. What you call inconsistency is merely the rhythm of energy that you have not yet learned to govern. The problem is not that you fall, it's that you forget that falling is part of the rhythm. When you attach guilt to your descent, you tighten the swing. The guilt becomes a magnet, pulling you deeper into an action. The pendulum swings harder, faster, until even rest feels like failure. But there is a secret hidden in the movement. What you resist in one pole, you amplify in the other. Every time you fight your stillness, you feed it. Every time you condemn your pause, you extend it. This is the psychic trap of the modern world. You were taught to measure your worth by speed, to mistake stillness for weakness. The digital labyrinth never stops moving. Scroll, react, consume, repeat. When you try to match its rhythm, you lose your own. Your natural frequency, slow, deliberate, creative, is overwritten by artificial urgency. And so, when your soul tries to restore balance, it shuts down. It refuses to move not out of laziness but as self-defense. Procrastination is your inner system pulling the emergency brake against the chaos of overstimulation. You are not weak. You are overloaded. The Hermetic masters knew this. They observed that every force, when pushed to an extreme, becomes its opposite. They learned to stand at the center of the pendulum, the point of equilibrium. That center is not stillness, it's mastery. When you observe the swing without identifying with it, you stop being thrown by its extremes. You begin to govern the motion instead of being governed by it. This is the hidden teaching behind the principle of rhythm. He who understands it will not be carried away by the tide. He will use it. The tide of procrastination is just a tide. When you learn its rhythm, you can surf it instead of drowning. Imagine your inner life as a great pendulum of light. When it swings toward the future, it becomes anxiety, an overextension of energy toward what is not yet real. When it swings toward the past, it becomes guilt, energy trapped in memory. Between these poles lies the present moment, and in that narrow middle, the eternal now, exists the only point where transformation is possible. That is where the alchemist stands, in rhythm, but not enslaved to it, in motion, but centered. You felt this state before, those rare moments when you acted effortlessly, when movement felt natural, inevitable, graceful. That was rhythm aligning. It wasn't motivation, it was coherence. Motivation burns fast. Rhythm sustains. The goal is not to chase motivation, but to restore coherence. So pause now and observe. Where is your pendulum? Are you stuck at one extreme, dreaming without acting, or acting without presence? Both are imbalance. The first burns in fantasy. The second burns in exhaustion. True movement is the third path, action born from stillness. When you find that center, even a small gesture becomes sacred. This is the first law of Hermetic motion. Energy obeys rhythm, not force. You cannot bully your mind into flow. You must synchronize with it. When you begin to listen, a subtle pulse emerges, faint at first, then constant. It is the pulse of will beneath fear, of clarity beneath noise. The more you honor it, the more power you retrieve from your extremes. So when you next feel paralyzed, do not fight the stillness. Stand at the center of your inner pendulum. Observe the swing. Let the energy move through you without naming it. You are not the one being swung. You are the axis. And from that axis, all creation begins. Remember, the pendulum never stops. But mastery means moving without being moved. You do not destroy the cycle. You harmonize with it. And when harmony returns, movement becomes inevitable again. Not forced, but remembered. Because you were never truly motionless. You were simply waiting to hear your own rhythm beneath the noise. The law was always there, whispering through the silence you called failure. You were never the swing, you were the center. The moment you remembered that, the pendulum began to slow. The silence you feared was never punishment. It was initiation. It was life teaching you to move again, but this time in rhythm. If these words echoed something ancient inside you, if they felt less like explanation and more like recognition, then understand, you didn't arrive here by accident. Messages like this are never pushed. They are pulled by the same resonance that's been calling you for years. And if you felt something vibrate while listening, don't let it fade back into stillness. Let your gesture become a signal to the field, a declaration of presence. Click subscribe right now. That act isn't just digital, it's symbolic. It says, I'm here. I remember. I choose to move with rhythm again, because from this point on, there's no return to unconscious motion. You've already begun to move. Everything in nature moves in waves. The ocean, the heartbeat, the breath, the seasons, all rise and fall, expand and contract. There is no straight line in the universe, no infinite ascent or descent, only rhythm. And within this rhythm, everything that resists flow becomes friction, heat, pressure, paralysis. Procrastination is friction made visible. It is energy trapped between two phases of the same rhythm, the inhale that never becomes exhale. When you understand this, your delay stops being a moral flaw and becomes a message. It's the pulse of the Hermetic law trying to restore your natural oscillation. The Kybalion says, everything flows, out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. This is not poetry. It's physics of consciousness. When your mind denies this law, your system revolts. The result is the phenomenon you call stuck. But in truth, nothing is ever stuck. Only the mind that resists the swing suffers its movement as pain. In Hermeticism, this is known as the principle of rhythm, the intelligence that moves all energy between poles so that equilibrium is maintained. Every expansion demands contraction. Every action requires rest. Every creative surge must be followed by absorption, digestion, silence. But the modern world has forgotten the sacred half of this law. It worships only expansion, growth, productivity, output, and demonizes the contraction that renews the flow. So when your body finally demands rhythm, you call it laziness. You name sacred pause as flaw. The result is psychological entropy, a mind always in motion but never in rhythm. You wake up moving but not flowing. You act, but without pulse. You vibrate, but without coherence. This is the hidden root of procrastination. Your actions are no longer synchronized with the hermetic pulse of your being. The initiate learns the opposite. He aligns with the rhythm instead of resisting it. When expansion comes, he acts fully. No hesitation, no delay. When contraction arrives, he withdraws consciously. No guilt, no shame. He becomes a living metronome of balance, and because he moves in harmony with the law, he never feels blocked. He simply rides each phase as it comes, rising, falling, resting, returning. The true secret of movement lies not in force, but in timing. When you act out of alignment with your inner rhythm, your energy disperses like sound hitting the wrong frequency. Loud, but meaningless. But when you act within your rhythm, even the smallest gesture carries power. It resonates, amplifies, completes itself. That is what the ancients meant when they said, to know rhythm is to command time. Time is not linear, it's vibrational. When you resist your natural tempo, you lose flow and therefore time. When you re-enter rhythm, you collapse delay into motion. You recover energy that was scattered across hesitation. It's not about doing faster, it's about doing in sync. Every moment of procrastination then is an invitation, not do more, but listen better. Because somewhere, a cycle in you is ending, an idea has run its course, an identity is dissolved. The energy that once served you must now be recollected, transmuted, reborn. That's why you can't move. You're still trying to act from an old frequency. The law is asking you to stop forcing and start aligning. In alchemy, this phase is called solve et coagula, dissolve, then recombine. The old rhythm must die before the new can emerge. Procrastination is simply the solve phase in disguise, the pause before the new rhythm is born. So what does the alchemist do? He doesn't curse the stillness when he listens to it. He sits in front of his incomplete work and asks, what rhythm am I denying? What part of me needs to breathe before moving again? He knows that in every delay hides a pulse waiting to be restored, and when he breathes with it, the body follows. Movement returns, not from motivation, but from coherence, because motivation comes and goes, but rhythm is eternal. The law doesn't need your effort, it only asks for your listening. When you act in harmony, every task becomes a ritual. Every small motion becomes alchemy in motion. You stop fighting yourself, and the energy that was locked in procrastination becomes fuel for creation. This is the hidden Hermetic code. Movement is not the result of effort. It is the byproduct of alignment. The moment you restore rhythm, you become the channel of your own will again. The pendulum no longer controls you. You control how far it swings, when it pauses, how it returns. You are no longer the slave of cycles, you are the conductor of them. When you realize this, procrastination stops being your enemy and becomes your teacher. It shows you where the rhythm broke and invites you to remember the music beneath the noise. The next time you feel the paralysis coming, don't force yourself to move. Close your eyes, inhale slowly, Feel the pulse of the world entering your chest. Exhale. That exhale is the beginning of your return, because every breath is a miniature of the cosmic rhythm. Inhale, creation. Exhale, release. Between them, life. When you align your breath, your actions follow. When your actions follow, your purpose awakens. And when purpose awakens, procrastination dissolves. Because where there is rhythm, there is no resistance, only flow. If you felt something real awaken while listening, a quiet remembering of rhythm, don't let it fade back into stillness. Click subscribe now and stay inside this frequency. Each video is another pulse in the same law, another movement toward coherence. That single gesture, your choice to stay, is how rhythm begins to live through you again. There is a moment, brief, almost imperceptible, between stillness and movement. It's not the act of starting that is difficult. It's the decision to cross that invisible threshold. Every alchemist knows the moment you begin, the universe reorganizes itself around your motion. But the beginning must be real, not forced, not reactive, born from coherence. That's the secret pulse you're about to reclaim. You've already understood the law. Everything moves in rhythm. Now comes the practice, the Hermetic act that reawakens rhythm inside the body. The masters called it the alchemical impulse. It is not a technique of productivity. It's a ritual of remembrance. Its purpose is simple: to reconnect your physical action to the cosmic rhythm that sustains all things. Here is how it begins. You take 5 minutes, no more, not to finish a task, not to achieve, just to begin. These are your 5 alchemical minutes, the fire that reignites motion. For those 5 minutes, you do not seek perfection, you seek movement. It doesn't matter what the action is. Write one line, clean one surface, breathe one full breath. The power is not in what you do, but in the fact that you move, because movement itself is invocation. When you move, you signal to the universe. The pendulum is free again. The Hermetic principle is clear. To oppose rhythm is to be crushed by it. To align is to command it. When you act for those 5 minutes, you step into alignment. And once aligned, rhythm carries you further than effort ever could. The first minute feels heavy. Inertia resists. The second minute lighter. Friction begins to dissolve. By the third, your mind quiets. By the fourth, your body remembers. And by the 5th minute, something ancient awakens. The current that has always known how to flow. What happened was not motivation. It was synchronization. You matched your frequency with the Hermetic rhythm that governs all existence. And from that point, momentum takes care of itself. Most people wait for clarity to begin, but in truth, clarity is born of beginning. The act precedes understanding, not the opposite. This is the hidden inversion of the Hermetic code. Light doesn't come before motion. Motion summons light. That's why the alchemist never waits for inspiration. He creates the conditions for it to appear. He turns movement into invocation. Each gesture becomes a spell that reopens the flow of energy through his being. This is the sacred rebellion against the illusion of waiting. The modern mind believes it needs to feel ready to start, but readiness is not emotional. It's vibrational. When your energy moves, your mind aligns. And once you are in motion, the inner resistance loses its form. It dissolves back into rhythm. Think of it this way. The universe is a vast ocean of vibration. You are one wave among billions. But the moment you move with awareness, the ocean recognizes you. It meets your gesture with momentum, amplifying it. The 5 minutes are your offering to the tide. When you move, the tide responds. When you hesitate, it withdraws. You are never alone in your motion. You are co-creating with the law itself. Procrastination, then, is not a personal failure. It's a broken dialogue. The ocean is waiting for your signal. Your 5 minutes are the signal. The wheel begins to turn not when you force it, but when you remember that you were never separate from its axis. And so the ritual is this. When you feel paralyzed, don't plan, don't analyze. Stand up, breathe once, touch the work, move for 5 minutes. Even if the motion feels mechanical, trust it. The soul only needs one spark to remember it was fire. 5 minutes of movement are enough to awaken a law older than time. The beauty of this practice is that it's not about results, and it's about rhythm. Each repetition strengthens your resonance with the universal flow. The more often you perform it, the less energy it takes to begin. Eventually, you no longer have to fight yourself. Your actions will unfold like breathing, effortless, alive, aligned. This is what Hermetic mastery looks like in practice. You no longer need to conquer the will, you cooperate with it. The law moves through you, not against you. Your energy stops leaking through resistance and begins circulating as creative force. Every task becomes an act of worship, every breath an invocation, every moment of movement a declaration that you remember, because in truth, you were never procrastinating. You were simply storing potential, waiting for the right frequency to unlock the flow again. Now you know how to turn the key. The alchemical impulse is not about doing more, it's about doing in harmony. It's not speed, it's presence. And when presence returns, you rediscover the rhythm that was never lost. The task you feared becomes lighter, not because it changed, but because you are now in tune with the law that governs all change. That is the true Hermetic transmutation, to transform resistance into rhythm, inertia into invocation, and delay into dance. The law was never judging you, it was waiting for your remembrance. And now that you've moved even once, the cycle has already begun anew. There comes a moment when the current returns. You don't notice it at first. It moves quietly, like breath rediscovered after drowning. One gesture becomes another. One thought leads to action, not through effort, but through inevitability. The wheel that once resisted now spins effortlessly, and you realize it was never the world that was heavy. It was you, spinning against your own rhythm. This is the return of flow, not the artificial kind that chases results, but the ancient one, the current that moves through all things. You are no longer trying to control the tide. You are moving as the tide. What you once called motivation was always temporary, but this quiet constancy is rhythm remembered. When you reach this state, action no longer drains you, it nourishes you. Each step gives energy instead of taking it. This is the paradox that Hermetic wisdom reveals. True movement doesn't consume energy, it releases it. Because you are no longer acting from separation, you are acting from coherence. The alchemist doesn't chase outcomes, he becomes the cause. He understands that every movement carries his frequency. When that frequency is clean, the result becomes inevitable. The external world becomes mirror, no longer obstacle. Every act done in rhythm becomes sacred. Every decision taken in alignment vibrates through unseen layers of reality. You begin to notice something strange. Synchronicities multiply. Time bends to your timing. People, opportunities, moments, all start to match your pulse. This is not magic, it is correspondence. As above, so below. As within, so without. The law of rhythm is the bridge between your inner and outer worlds. When your internal wave stabilizes, the external world follows suit. This is why the old masters never separated work and spirit. To sweep the floor was to align the temple. To write a line, to breathe a breath, to move a hand, all were acts of invocation. The sacred was never elsewhere, it was in the rhythm of doing. Every motion when conscious becomes prayer. You begin to understand that flow is not something you enter, it's something you stop interrupting. It was always there, beneath the noise, beneath the guilt, beneath the fear of beginning. Every breath you take in awareness reopens the current. Every deliberate motion declares, I remember. That remembrance is the highest magic, not summoning, but returning. Now you see why the world feels chaotic to those who lost rhythm. They are pulled by tides they don't recognize, trapped in loops of doing without being. But you've begun to hear the pulse beneath it all. You can feel when the wave rises and when it falls, and you ride it instead of drowning. This is mastery, not control, but surrender to law. Procrastination dissolves not because you fought it, but because you learned to listen to what it was trying to say. It was your teacher in disguise. It brought you to silence so you could rediscover the rhythm that creates worlds. In that silence, you found movement again, and now movement has become presence. You don't act to escape stillness. You act from stillness. You don't chase results. You channel rhythm. You are the axis around which motion happens. The pendulum still swings, but you are no longer at its mercy. You are its center, the unmoving mover. When you work from this state, the smallest action carries infinite precision. You no longer scatter your energy in 10 directions. Every gesture becomes exact, every word intentional, every pause full of purpose. That is the difference between ordinary motion and hermetic flow. One burns fuel, the other circulates light. It's not about doing less or more. It's about returning to coherence. The will, once fragmented, becomes whole again, and once whole, it becomes unstoppable, not through power, but through inevitability. Because rhythm cannot be resisted forever, it always wins. The universe itself is proof of that. Stars burn and fade, galaxies breathe, hearts beat, everything dances to the same law, and now you do too. The energy that was once trapped in procrastination has become momentum. The tension that once felt unbearable has become gravity pulling you forward. You no longer need to force, and the flow carries you. You are not trying to start anymore. You are already moving, and that movement will carry you far beyond what your old self could imagine, because it no longer comes from effort. It comes from rhythm, and rhythm is eternal. This is the real transmutation. Stillness became movement. Inertia became flow. Delay became devotion. You didn't escape your shadow. You danced with it, and through that dance you found freedom. From this moment on, your task is not to keep moving. It's to keep listening, because rhythm never leaves. We only stop hearing it. Your work is to stay close to the pulse, to live in a way where action and awareness are the same. That is what it means to be aligned with the law. And so, when you wake tomorrow, don't ask if you feel ready. Simply remember the rhythm. Let your first motion, however small, be sacred. Because the moment you move with awareness, you are no longer a seeker. You are a creator. Flow is not found. Flow is remembered. Will is rhythm made conscious. When rhythm becomes self-aware, it transforms into direction, into creation. This is the secret that Hermeticism guards in silence. You are not merely moved by the tides of existence. You are meant to conduct them. The principle of will is not separate from the law of rhythm. They are two aspects of the same current. One flows, the other commands. The law moves all things. The will decides how they move through you. When your will vibrates in harmony with rhythm, action ceases to feel like choice. It becomes destiny fulfilled consciously. Every creator, every sage, every master who ever shaped reality did so through this secret. They ceased to fight the flow and began to aim it. They didn't try to force outcomes. They tuned themselves into the frequency of inevitability. When the current of will and the current of rhythm merge, you don't push reality. You become the direction it chooses to take. That is what it means to act in divine alignment. Not to impose your desires on life, but to let the universal current express itself through your form. You are no longer trying to make things happen. You are allowing what wants to happen to pass through your hands. The ancient Hermeticists called this state the union of fire and air. Fire, the principle of will. Air, the principle of rhythm and movement. When united, they create the creative flame, the power to manifest thought into form effortlessly. You have felt fragments of this state before. Those moments when you spoke a truth and the world seemed to rearrange itself around your words. When you followed an intuition so naturally that coincidence became choreography. Those moments were not chance. They were alignment. They were your will vibrating at the same frequency as the law. That is the level of harmony Hermetic practice seeks. A rhythm so total that even silence becomes command. To reach it, you must understand the paradox. You do not control rhythm by will. You purify will until it vibrates in rhythm. Every act of resistance, every anxious impulse, is coarse metal. Through discipline, silence, and motion, you refine it into gold. This is the magnum opus, not the transformation of lead into gold, but of scattered desire into unified will. Look at your life. Every time you act in harmony with your essence, the result expands. Every time you act from fear, from impatience, from fragmentation, the result contracts. The difference is not moral, it's vibrational. When your will aligns with your natural rhythm, creation happens effortlessly. When it opposes it, energy collapses into resistance. So the question is no longer how do I act, but from what rhythm does my action emerge? The Hermetic initiate stops asking for strength. He asks for alignment, because strength without rhythm is chaos, but rhythm, even with gentleness, becomes unstoppable. That's the hidden power behind calmness. It's not weakness, it's perfect resonance. The world cannot resist what moves in harmony with law. When your will is rhythmic, every gesture becomes creative. The smallest action reverberates across layers of existence. A thought held in coherence reshapes events. A word spoken in alignment bends probability. This is not fantasy, it's Hermetic physics. The universe is mental. Vibration is its fabric. When your will vibrates clearly, reality organizes around it. It has no choice. It is law. But remember, will without rhythm becomes domination, control born of fear. Rhythm without will becomes passivity, surrender without awareness. The alchemist walks between them. He commands without forcing and surrenders without losing direction. He is the flame that dances, never static, yet never extinguished. You are meant to become that flame, to act without strain, to move without hurry, to decide without doubt. Because once the will is rhythmic, every action becomes an echo of the original motion of creation. You are no longer separate from the source that breathes universes into being. You are the breath itself, aware, deliberate, alive. The ancient texts spoke of this as the marriage of heaven and earth within the self. When your inner motion mirrors the cosmic one, you no longer manifest, you emanate. You don't pull reality toward you, it unfolds from within you. Because rhythm is the language of God, and will, when purified, speaks it fluently. So how do you sustain this state? You return to the breath. You return to the pulse. You remember that will is not tension, it's tone. Each time you breathe in coherence, you retune the instrument of your being, and each exhale becomes command, invisible but absolute. That is why every Hermetic teaching begins and ends with silence. In silence, you meet the law. In motion, you express it. Together, they form the eternal pulse, the living bridge between thought and world, between you and the all. When you finally understand this, you stop chasing purpose. You become purpose. Your life itself becomes an act of rhythm. Every day, a cycle. Every choice, a beat. Every pause, sacred. This is the true rhythm of the will, the dance of consciousness aware of its own power. From this point forward, nothing you do is ordinary, because now you know every movement is a spell, every breath, a law in motion. And if you dare to live like this, awake, aligned, rhythmic, you will never be stuck again, because the will that moves with rhythm never meets resistance. It moves as the rhythm itself. If this truth resonated, if you felt that unmistakable click inside, that moment when your inner pulse matched these words, click like and subscribe now, not as reaction, but as declaration. Each new video deepens this current. Each lesson strengthens the rhythm of your will. Mark your presence here as a vow to live by the law that never sleeps, the rhythm that creates worlds. In the beginning, there was stillness, and from stillness, rhythm was born. Now, at the end of this path, you realize there was never a difference between them. Stillness was movement waiting to be remembered, and procrastination, the shadow you feared, was only the silence before your song. You have walked through the labyrinth of inertia, And somewhere along the way, the walls began to breathe. The corridors you thought were endless were never traps. They were cycles. The pauses that shamed you were not failure. They were initiations. The darkness was not absence, it was preparation for rhythm. Now the wheel turns again. You feel it. Slow, deliberate, ancient, not outside but within. It's the pulse of creation reawakening in your chest. The same force that moves planets, that spins galaxies, that lifts tides and falls as rain, now moves through you, because it always did. You were never separate from the motion of the cosmos. You were only asleep in it. This is the final understanding. You were never meant to control the flow. You were meant to remember it. The law doesn't demand, it invites. It calls you back to coherence, to simplicity, to the quiet courage of beginning again. Every day the law whispers, move. And when you obey, not from pressure but from presence, you become part of the great rhythm, conscious, luminous, free. You've already felt it, that shift when resistance melted, that breath when time slowed and you remembered who you are. That was the law breathing through you, the return of movement as awareness, the union of will and rhythm, the merging of the human with the cosmic. This is your seal. The moment you understand that the smallest act, when done with awareness, completes the circle. Every step you take, every breath you honor, is another rotation of the sacred wheel, the same wheel that turns worlds. This is why the alchemists called it the opus in motion, because once you move in truth, you never stop. The rhythm becomes your teacher, your ally, your prayer. Now when you feel stillness again, and you will no longer call it procrastination. You will know it as the inhale before creation, the pause before the pulse. You will recognize it as rhythm balancing itself, and you will smile, because you remember. That is mastery. Not to escape the cycle, but to flow through it with open eyes, to move without rush, to pause without guilt, to create without fear, to know that every motion is sacred when done in alignment with the law. You have become what you were seeking, a being in rhythm, a consciousness that moves with purpose, a fragment of infinity remembering its pulse. And that remembrance is the true seal, the moment when knowledge becomes vibration. The wheel turns, you turn with it, and as it spins, your life begins to echo the harmony of the universe. Each choice becomes cadence, each word becomes light, each silence becomes rhythm. And now you know, the Hermetic code behind procrastination was never about doing, it was about remembering how to be. Because the moment you are in rhythm, everything else moves. Let this be your initiation, from stillness to flow, from hesitation to rhythm, from doubt to will. The movement has begun, and it will not stop. If you've come this far, you didn't just watch, you crossed. You didn't just hear, you resonated. You are part of a circle that now moves together, a current that reawakens through those who remember. So before you go, seal your initiation. If this message resonated in the depths of your stillness, if you felt the rhythm of your will return, then you already know this isn't an ending. It's the first movement of something larger. You've remembered the law of rhythm, but every law hides another behind it. So don't stop here. The wheel has only begun to turn. Subscribe now and step through the next portal, the continuation of this same current. Because initiation doesn't pause, it spirals. And the next video isn't another episode. It's the next octave of your awakening. You've crossed one threshold. Now the next one is already open.